Hello, everybody. This is Ron Knights. Welcome, all my friends, to the Ron Knights Show, Thursday edition, February the 3rd. My special guest today is Keith Barrett of keithbarrett.com. How you doing, Keith?
Okay, how you doing, Ron?
Not too bad. So, man, what you been up to?
Oh, well, lately I just been just working in my job. I work in Disney IT, and I do middleware software support and development there. Um, and the software I do there allows the off-site ticket sellers, like the Disney stores, etc., to connect to our back-end systems for ticket sales.
So you could sell us tickets?
No, I'm just a I'm just the computer guy in the middle.
That just sounds like a good thing to say. And you have a lot of hobbies too, right?
Yeah, I've been in IT for over 30 years, so I have a great love of technology. I try to be an early adopter when I can afford it. The pace of technology change now makes it really hard to be an early adopter unless you've got a lot of money set aside for it. But I've been a Linux user since the very beginning, since the early mid 90s when Linux was first introduced on the internet. And I even worked at Red Hat for a couple of years as a Linux engineer. And I'm also an infrastructure guy. I have a background I did for over 5 years. I did design and development and hands-on building of infrastructure from dead scratch to fully functioning LAN WAN environments. So I have a pretty wide background in IT. And for my hobbies, I have my own studio here in the house I'm trying to do things with. Right now, it's mostly being played with, but I'm hoping to do some more serious things with it soon. So.
And let me see here. I'm looking behind you. Is that a Linux license
Yeah,
plate?
I have a lot of toys behind me. I have a lot of geeky toys. I have I have this. This is sort of what I use for my avatar a lot because oops, sorry, because this is me. This is a Linux penguin wearing Mickey Mouse ears. It's a Linux guy at Walt Disney World.
There you
And
go.
yeah, that's me. And then I have a Tom Servo head back here from literally I bought that when Mystery Science had just first come out.
Oh, wow.
And I've got a bunch of robots. I've got Robbie. I've got Lost in Space. I've got the stapler from Office Space. Um, as you saw, the Linux license plate. I have a clock here. That's my homage to Leo Laporte. And you can't see the rest of the room, but there's a lot of toys in this room. There's a lot of geeky
What
toys.
about
There's
the,
an
I'm sorry,
R2D2 sitting above my head somewhere.
what about that big picture? It looks like it could be Doctor Doom or somebody
No,
there.
I can't. Unfortunately, I can't scan it and show you the rest of it. But that's a Darth Vader. It's
Ah,
from Disney. Every year has this thing called Star Wars Weekends,
yeah.
where every weekend for about a month, the Hollywood Studios Park has a lot of celebrities from Star Wars there. They have a special parade every day. They have a special event each night. And the entire park is half the park is like recruiting for the rebellion, the other half is recruiting for the empire, and so there's a lot of characters throughout there. And that every year they do a special poster and T-shirt design, and that's what that is behind me. That's Darth Vader with Mickey Mouse ears being painted on top of his head, but you can't see the top half of it, unfortunately.
Oh, Mickey Mouse here, some Darth
Yeah.
Vader. So you were talking about some green screen work you've been doing and what you use for green screen.
Yeah, I was producer of a Disney podcast for a while, and one of the things that they wanted to do is I tried to gear up the studio to be flexible to do whatever I wanted to do. So I've got multiple monitors in here, multiple computers, 3 or 4 cameras, and one of the things I wanted to have was a green screen. I was very tempted to put it behind me for your show and put something else behind me, but I use the same green screen that iJustine uses, which is a $10 green blanket from IKEA. Almost all of the furniture in my studio is IKEA. It could be an IKEA catalog.
Wow.
The desk, the bookcases, the green screen, and I just have it hanging on. I have it hanging on a rail system that swivels around the room, the same way hospital curtains do. So it's hanging from the ceiling, and I can move the green screen wherever I want in the room.
Wow, that's really cool. I mean, if you're able to put up that kind of stuff, living in an apartment, I don't think I'd get away with that.
Well, its impact on in the room is very minimal.
Yeah.
There's about 10 mountain points, so it's like 10, nail size holes in the ceiling. And the whole thing was like $100 because IKEA sells
Wow.
that too. So
Wow, that's pretty
I
good.
got tired of hanging it up and down. So
Well, yeah, exactly. I'm a lazy type. That's why I probably get one of those ones that you can just lean up against the wall, where it's got a hook you can hang it on the wall for $50, 5x7. Boom. But that's going to be down the road. Okay, so let's see. You mentioned one example for somebody that had no IT department or whatever, and you went through and set up everything.
yeah, well, one of the aspects of my personality, I like knowing everything about everything. I was not happy starting off as a software developer and only knowing how to program computers. And I actually did some fairly significant programming, and some of the stuff I wrote became pretty well-known industry products. But I also wanted to learn system management, and when you start managing the systems, you want to know security. Then you eventually want to learn networking. So I took courses on router administration, etc. Um, Eventually, anything concerning technology, especially networking, connecting multiple things together, making two things talk is a lot of fun. I wanted to get involved with. So one of the jobs I had is I used to work for a company called Bayer Pharmaceuticals, the people who make the aspirin. And I joined this facility in North Carolina that had just installed network wiring to everybody's desk. Everybody had a personal PC, and they were now cabled up, but they didn't know what to do after that. They didn't have an IT department there. They didn't have a lot of. They had one tech there that would run around and maintain the PCs. And I got hired originally as a system administrator for some of the servers there, and I very quickly became frustrated that I couldn't do a lot of stuff. I couldn't. Every time we had to do a change on a PC, required a physical visit, and so I decided I pretty much as I could on my own time, um, using internet as my standard because we didn't have any funds for it, designed a LAN WAN infrastructure for the facility, and it had military time sync, it had DNS, it had file services, print services, CD-ROM tower, um, login authentication. I found a GUI that allowed us to use SMTP email as if it was a Microsoft product type GUI, and all of this pretty much being free software. The Mosaic web browser was the web browser at the time. It was even before Netscape, and I pretty much created this whole infrastructure leveraging Linux as much as possible because of my heavy Linux background. We had a couple of Windows servers for login authentication for people's passwords and for some Windows apps. And I wrote some scripts, put them on a floppy, and I told the tech, go visit every PC once. It was about 1,200 users, about 1,200 PCs. Go visit every PC once, boot this floppy, answer the half a dozen questions it's going to ask you. It's going to reboot the PC 2 or 3 more times and tell you when it's done. And it was asking questions like, what do you want this PC to be called? What's its IP address? A couple of things like that. And when it was done, I now had a functioning LAN environment where people would log in, and it had a profile that would roam a little bit, so you can log in on different PCs. Finally, you weren't locked into the one PC there. I could push changes out to the PC by having somebody log in, and it would run their login script, and that would push out a change. So it cut down on the number of reasons we had to visit PCs over and over again. And it received a lot of notoriety within the company. Within 5 years, I ended up being a manager of the IT group, and we did this at 5 facilities. So I was in charge of 5 different facilities, and eventually we started adopting corporate standards too. We switched to Microsoft Mail and a couple of things, but and I ended up with a staff of 8 people in the long run. So, but it shows you how if you have the skills, it's very fortunate that I knew I had the skills, but I had never been able to prove it to anybody. To have an opportunity where they trusted me to go off and do my own thing with it, and it was very successful. So that was reassuring for myself that the things I knew were worthwhile and did integrate together well. So it was a lot of fun. I'm probably thinking someday I'll write something about it so that I can share that experience with other people.
Sounds like a good idea, and I can only imagine the kind of satisfaction you have now. I suppose in the period of time since then, they might have gone on to other things, or they just kept building on
Yeah,
their.
well, yeah. I mean, I eventually left that facility to go work at Red Hat.
Oh,
I
okay.
worked as a Linux developer there and as a team leader on various projects over at Red Hat. So yeah, I mean, they took over the infrastructure and they did more and more things with it. I think the office was eventually, some of the offices were eventually bought and sold. So I think they're occupying one or two. They're not occupying all of them anymore. But my user base was several thousand people when I did that, and so it was a good experience for me. I had to learn everything, right, from wiring standards, the TIA wiring standards, Cat 5, all that stuff, all the way up to I handled all the outsourcing and the purchasing of the equipment and everything. So it was when I left that company, I was a system manager, third down from the division. I had an operating budget of about 1.2 million every year to maintain the infrastructure, and I handled the outsourced support of the networks at all the facilities. And I had passed my hat for running the data centers over to somebody else.
Ah, so a couple thousand people was it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Man.
not near as big as where I am today, but significant for
Oh,
something that didn't have any staff or any budget and
no.
didn't quite know what to do. But it shows you that part of the reason why the internet works. I mean, and it's the way startups operate today. Startups don't sit there and spend $30,000 on Microsoft licenses and install an infrastructure. You know, startups, they tend to leverage Macs, they tend to leverage Linux as much as possible. If you have any, you can. I've worked in two companies my whole life. One before Microsoft existed, and then at Red Hat later on, where there wasn't a single Microsoft product in the entire company. So you can create fully functioning, highly sophisticated, highly reliable. My background is mostly high availability environments without Microsoft. However, it is difficult to do that completely because Microsoft does have a huge foothold on login authentication for a lot of the apps and for the domain environments that you have to create for that. So today, I usually recommend for people that are trying to adopt Linux that aren't starting from dead scratch, Linux is your perfect service for your IP environment. Have it replace your file print, your DNS, all those services, because you can usually do that with a minimal of impact and get your availability up higher at the same time.
Cool. As long as it works. Now you were saying that people have said, asked you if you met some of the big names in Linux history. You care to
Well,
share any?
big names in Linux. I don't know what you would call a big name. I certainly, when Linux first came out, Linus and I used to correspond because I was a beta tester of version 0 Linux when it was just published in text on the Usenet at the time. That's how far back I go. And I am friends with Stephen Tweedy. Stephen Tweedy is the creator of the ext3.4 file systems, ext2, 3, and 4 file systems. I know Alan Cox, although I haven't talked to Alan since leaving Red Hat. He was the kernel maintainer for a long time. And there's a half a dozen other people that I still keep friendships with. Chris Blizzard, one of the people who heads over the Mozilla project for Firefox, I stay in touch with him casually. The work I do now doesn't really involve Linux. I'm mostly a middleware programmer and support, so I don't have an awful lot of open source going on in my life right now, except for in my own house.
So is Linux your primary operating system right now?
My feeling, I try not to have religion about it. Every operating system has pros and cons and niches. I tend to like Microsoft the least because it is less reliable. It's designed with a lot more Windows has two things going against being an incredibly high availability operating system. The first is its starting point was originally the consumer market running on a huge variety of software and then moving into the data center environment. And so it has all that legacy stuff that it brings with it and maintains with it. And that's one of the reasons why the GUI is still so married to the operating system. And it wasn't until Windows NT that multi-user and multi-threading started to show up in the operating system. So whereas Unix has had that from day one, and Unix doesn't even need the GUI. The GUI is a usability add-on. So unless you're doing photographs or video, you can do everything you need to do without the GUI. Linux, I love Linux because I love Unix. Unix is an incredibly efficient operating system. You can do a lot with it, and Linux, of course, is free, and there's really no constraints on what you can do with it. And it's robust enough, and it runs on a lot of platforms. The problem with Linux, as opposed to Microsoft, is Microsoft as a company has a lot of personal partnerships with developers of hardware. And people write drivers. They tend to write them first for the Windows operating system because it has the bulk of the market share. So there are situations where if you install Linux on a laptop, for example, you may find that different versions of Linux, different flavors of it will produce different results. And you may find, hey, everything works but the Bluetooth for some reason. And you got to go find a personal way to make the Bluetooth work. And it's not Linux's fault. It's a lack of cooperation between hardware vendors, or that's as far as the reverse engineering has gone on a particular piece of hardware. There are huge websites out there. One of them is Linux Laptops for the people who want to put it on laptops. Ubuntu has its own website for their operating system release, and they will help you. And it's usually your pain will be the least if you can, as much as possible, keep hardware that's compatible with the operating system. That's true of any operating system, but if you've ever built a Hackintosh, which is pretty much a Mac on standard Intel hardware rather than using Apple hardware, you'll know that the best way to do that and get the most success out of that is to obtain your hardware and design it in the first place to be compatible with what you're doing, instead of just going and using what you have and putting the stuff on it. And I'm also a big Mac fan. The MacBook has been the best laptop I've ever had in my whole life. I became a Mac user about 3 years ago. And my MacBook is still going strong. The studio here is being run by a Mac Mini that I purchased in 2010. And in my bedroom TV upstairs is being run by another Mac Mini. And I have that set up such that I cut the cable. I don't watch cable television anymore. I don't pay for it. I watch all my television on the internet.
Well, we got something in common. I got my first Mac about 3 years ago. That was the iMac. I'm running the show right now on a Mac Mini, which I bought. It was 2010, which came out just before the unibody ones. So, hey, cool. So how far back do you go in the computer experience? And what year did you start or whatever?
Well, when I grew up, I thought for sure I was going to be a chemist. I've always had an analytical, logical, deductive mind. That's how I treat everything. So I was positive I was going to be a chemist. And then I even had a huge chemistry lab in my basement and was studying scientific methods and things like that. And then when I entered high school, and this would be about 1975, it was just before high school, actually, middle school, I came across what they had was a teletype connection using an acoustic coupler modem to the University of Bridgeport's computer. And they had that set up so people could learn programming. Most of the, pretty much BASIC was the language being used for programming. And I came across that, and I wrote a couple of quick programs, and I found that that was so addictive that when high school came, I spent my entire summer vacations in the computer room. I took all the computer classes that they offered. I ate the computer so much that by the time I went to college, I knew more about computers than a lot of the professors were that were teaching college courses. So I ended up in college doing work-study programs teaching other people.
Wow. Now, what year was that you kind of got bitten by the bug again?
Well, my high school years would be 72 to 76.
Okay.
So my high school was one of the first in New England to have a PDP-11 computer system. So I got my start on PDP-11s, made by Digital Equipment Corporation. And then when I went to college, after the first year, I actually got hired by Digital Equipment. And I got hired as the youngest software engineer that the Connecticut offices had ever hired at that point in time. And I did software support and programming for both PDP-11 computers and VAX VMS computers. And a huge part of my career, probably up until the late 90s, was all VAX VMS. Linux was my hobby. A huge amount of Linux, but it was never in my profession. So eventually, when I got to work for Red Hat, Part of the reason I left a pretty good job with a lot more money for that is because I went to go work and get paid doing my hobby. So it was the first time I was actually getting paid to do the very thing I'd been doing as my hobby my whole life.
Wow, that's a dream come true, my friend.
It was. I enjoyed it very much. I probably would have still been there, but I was there for a couple of years, and then the dot-com bubble burst, and everybody had to do layoffs, and eventually they had to do layoffs in the engineering group. And one of the projects that got backburnered was the one I was working on. So that was a sad end to my Red Hat career, but it was enjoyable while I had it.
Well, that happens. Now, what area or what school did you go to in New England? High school or college? Or
well,
whatever?
I grew up in Shelton, Connecticut.
Okay.
And I went to college for a year at Quinnipiac in Hamden, Connecticut.
Oh.
And then I got hired for my profession after finishing my first year. I never actually went back and finished the degree. And then because I worked for the number 2 computer company in the world at the time, which was DEC, second only to IBM, whose still market dominance was IBM mainframes and SNA. DEC had the multi-user time-sharing computer systems that were far more reliable than people are used to. People don't realize that VAX VMS systems and Unix systems and Novell systems too. I was a Novell person for a little while. Those systems can stay up for years, without touching them. Whereas most people adopt the practice on a Windows server that you should reboot it every month or two to prevent it from crashing when you don't want it to. So I haven't been happy with the Microsoft server operating systems until recently, until we got into the 2000s. Now I think Microsoft's doing a pretty good job with those operating systems. But for a long time, and again, part of it was because they used to design that stuff to run a lot of commodity hardware. And when Windows NT came out, it started to reveal how really shabby a lot of PC hardware was. Windows NT had a lot of problems to the point where Microsoft initially said they had to designate what hardware was compatible with Windows NT, because Windows NT, being an event-driven, multi-threaded operating system, kept crashing because the backplanes and a lot of cheap PCs would just have an interrupt that came out of nowhere and would just kill it. So there's been a growth there. But when I look back and I look at Unix and VAX VMS, those systems, it was not unusual to hear people having a VAX system that they hadn't touched in 5 years, because you could even reinstall the operating system in a clustered environment, and your entire environment would still stay up.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was how I got a lot of my high availability background, which is why Red Hat had hired me, because I had a huge amount of high availability experience. My role at Red Hat was I created the industry's first high availability Linux product. Actually, I have a copy of it here. You can't get it anymore, though. It's Red Hat High Availability Server 1.0. And it was the first Linux product that Red Hat produced that was geared toward being a high availability server, and it was also the first one that came secure out of the box, which meant that all the services like FTP, etc., they were not enabled by default, and the allow and deny files shut everything out first, and then you turned and enabled all that stuff. So, and then after a while, Red Hat, through a series of purchases, bought other high availability technologies and merged them and changed things. So this product eventually got retired and replaced by other things.
Now, just out of curiosity, you've had all this experience you're talking about. Now, as far as you, Keith, at home,
right?
What was the first computer you had for yourself at home?
Well, the first computer I touched and had in my house was borrowed from a friend. And it was an Altair 680,
Okay.
which many people, unless they were really old timers, probably have never heard of. That actually was the first home commercial computer, was an Altair 680, which came as a kit. And when you put it together, it never worked. Your next step was you took it to your local electronics store to troubleshoot it and figure out, why isn't this thing working? The first home computer I owned would be an Atari 800.
Oh, okay.
And then after that, an Amiga 2000.
Oh, Amiga 2000.
Yeah, with a bridge card in it, because that was the least expensive way to get a hard drive in the system. And then an Amiga 3000 running Unix.
Wow.
And then after that, I got tired. I loved the Amiga computer system. It's a perfect example of Superior hardware just dying because the company itself was just couldn't make it go any further. I got tired of going to computer fairs and seeing rooms full of stuff for Windows, PC, DOS people. And then there was always the one little table in the corner that was Amiga stuff.
Yeah.
And so, and I wanted to, I was running Amiga Unix on it, and I was doing that mostly so I could work at home as well as using my Unix systems at work. The problem with Amiga Unix is it came with a 2-user license. And that user license included background processes. It counted batch jobs, not background processes, but it counted batch processes, stuff that you ran through cron or AT as users. And the unlimited user license was several $1,000s, something I could not afford. And that's what started me looking for an alternative Unix system for my home. And I looked at Xenix, SCO Xenix. I looked at Minix, which was mostly a file system. And then that's what I came across Linux, because Linux had just been put out. Linus was going to school at Helsinki in Finland, and he was doing this as a school project. And he just posted it on the Usenet, saying, "Hey, I just did this kernel. Can you guys check it out and test it and tell me what you think?" And a bunch of us took a look at it and bundled it with Stallman had started the Free Software Foundation project at that point in time with the GNU utilities. And so we bundled it up with the GNU utilities, which gave us the basic Unix command set. And those became the first versions of Linux. And I ran it. It came on 11 floppies, 11 to 20 floppies when I first installed it. And it did everything I needed it to do that I was getting out of the AT&T system, but I had an unlimited user license with this environment, and I had all the source code. So I went out and replaced my Amiga system with a gateway that I configured with SCSI and things like that to be very Linux compatible. And then I ran with Linux in my house for years and years and after that.
So just out of curiosity, for those of us who don't know, what kind of a time period are you looking at, like when you had the Amigas and then when you went to the PC and whatnot?
Oh, I wish I could have prepared for that.
Well, just in general,
I'm probably going to guess
80s,
that wrong.
90s?
Well, certainly the Atari would be the 80s. The Amiga would be the Amigas would be the 80s and early 90s as well.
Okay, yeah, the later 80s.
Yeah, the Linux system would be the gateway Linux system would also be the mid to late 80s, I think, as well. No, actually, Linux came out in 92, I think, so it would be the early 90s.
Yeah, see, the only reason I asked, Keith, like, for me, my first computer that I had in my house was a Commodore VIC-20. It was like 1983. I remember it very well because that's when I gave up my comic book habit to have money for computers, and then I went from there. So, except I went to the Atari 520 ST instead of the Amigas, and then eventually I got tired of that and went to PCs.
Yeah, and it's funny because once I had my Linux systems up in the house, I didn't buy anything but Intel and set up Linux systems for a long, long time, for easily over 10 years. And it wasn't until several years ago I started to buy new computing equipment again, mostly Macs, mostly for my studio and some other things. So.
Yeah, I didn't mean to tax your brain on that question.
Well, I wanted to be accurate. It's tough to think that far back. I can remember the progression, but I can't necessarily remember the years it fell on.
It sounds like your first exposure to some type of computer goes back to like the 70s for some of that.
Well, I like to tell people when I was a kid in the 60s.
Yeah.
I was given a Christmas present, and people have to Google this. I was given a Christmas present. It was a home computer called the Digicomp 2, DIGICOMP space II for 2, and it was a mechanical computer, and
wow.
it can count, and you had to assemble it, and you would put it had hardware versions of flip-flops, and you would program them by putting pegs on it. But it would count in binary. It would play simple games like Hammurabi and things like that. It could only count from 0 to 7 because it only had 3 digits. I like to say that's my first computer.
Well, there you go.
But it didn't register at that point in time that I would get hooked on computers. I just thought it was a nifty little toy. I didn't, I was too young to know what that was representing. Apparently, that was a very significant piece of equipment back then. It was really demonstrating a lot of concepts in computing before home computers had come out.
Yeah, someone put up a link there in the chat room.
Yeah, it's an interesting. There's a Wikipedia entry on it. It's an interesting little device. You can buy them now. Somebody sells them now, made out of stiff cardboard instead of plastic. But
oh, cool.
It's like on my list of toys I would like to get just to have hanging on my shelf again.
Now, do you have any other passions, like things you collect or TV shows you like to watch or movies?
Yeah, I don't like to think of myself as a collector because I find it hard to collect something that I can't have all of.
Yeah.
And of course, it's very, because some people get around that by specializing, like, well, I'll collect all the blue versions of something, or I'll collect all the specific authors of something. The only real thing I have collections of various things, most of them because I've been associated with that. For example, I have a lot of Mystery Science Theater 3000 paraphernalia because when that show first came out, I was doing my own cable show at the time in community access cable, and I saw Mystery Science Theater and I said, man, that's the ultimate cable show. It's a 2-hour show where you do nothing but sit and make fun of a movie. It's a fixed set. Fixed camera, fixed set. I was kicking myself. I had never thought of that. And so much so that I went and visited the guys. And actually, there's photographs on my Facebook page of me being on the satellite of love and holding the real Tom Servo and Crow and things like that. And so I have a lot of paraphernalia of Mystery Science Theater since day one. I was also original contributor to the FAQ for the show way back then, too. I also have every issue of Starlog magazine. That's only because I've been a subscriber since issue number 1, and I just kept them all. I didn't actually go out of my way to go buy them. I have some Disney paraphernalia. I have a lot of pins, even though I'm not a pin connector. I still have a lot of my old computer books, some of my old magazines. Again, most of this stuff is stuff I've held on to since I originally obtained it.
So your place is pretty full of memories?
Yeah, I'm trying to squish them all into this one room. As you get older, you like to consolidate stuff and get rid of it. But yeah, there's nothing. I mean, I suppose I have a lot of robots. I have about 3 or 4 Robbie the robots in various sizes. I have 3 or 4 Lost in Space robots in various sizes.
Yeah.
The Tom Servo head is sitting behind me. So, there's a Wall-E sitting up in the wall over there too. So there's another. Yeah, that's actually. Can you see that up in the corner there?
Yeah. I didn't know what it was, but now I do.
That's a Wall-E, and he's actually sitting on the camera that I use in my studio that gives you the room shot.
Oh, okay. I see now. Interesting.
My hobby lately has been the studio. Trying to the studio's gone through several revisions since I created it originally. It was originally running on my MacBook using CamTwist and Flash Media Encoder, and I couldn't do much with it because that took all of the computing power just to do that. And so I ended up buying a Mac Mini for it and setting up multiple monitors and getting an audio mixer and getting that all connected up. And then I've recently switched to Wirecast, which has helped free up a lot of resources. So, but because I'm using different software now, I have to recreate all my lower thirds and stuff.
Yeah.
So the stuff's an evolution. The studio's at the point where I can do a pretty decent, high quality broadcast now. So I got to start.
Speaking of which, I'm sorry.
I was going to say,
can I break in for just a second, my friend?
Sure.
I want to, since you brought up Wirecast, I've been wanting to do this more often. I want to thank Wirecast Telestream for their support in providing me with a copy of Wirecast doing my shows. Also, my friends, if you happen to be watching the show on Justin TV and you notice we're not in the chat room there, you want to come to live.ronnights.com and you can see the show and the chat there. And besides that, if you want to use your IRC client, you would like to use irc.wildride.org and pound Ron Nights. I mean that figuratively. Good. Okay, go ahead. Keep going.
No, I pretty much finished up with that.
Okay. how about favorite TV shows, movies, anything like that?
Well, I've been a Doctor Who addict since the original series came out. It was first shown in the United States in the 70s, I believe. So I'm a long time Doctor Who fan. Although I think the new shows now are incredible. And unfortunately, I think David Tennant was the best Doctor the Doctor Who has ever had. And I was very sad to see him leave. So I'm still trying. Right now, I tend to like the companion more than the Doctor at the moment. But he may grow on me. So,
well, when they have a companion who's a sexy woman, I tend to favor them.
oh, she's just adorable. So. So I watch Doctor Who I've been watching a lot of anime. I've gotten into anime in the last year and a half, 2 years. Partially because when I cut the cable and switched to internet television only, your viewing habits change when you do that. The only broadcast television you watch is through the air. So if I'm not watching something on ABC, CBS, NBC through the air, I'm watching stuff through the internet, and the internet is my giant PVR. I don't have to worry about when I watch it because the shows are always there. But predominantly, you end up watching a lot of your television either through Netflix or Hulu. Those are the two primary sources for it. There are others. My television set is run using a Mac Mini running the Plex software. And Plex software gives me plugins, so I also watch the Twit television channel for all the Leo Laporte stuff. I watch The Daily Show and The Colbert Show and a couple of other things. But predominantly when I'm watching a lot of television shows, I'm watching them through Hulu and Netflix. And I found out that Hulu had a huge amount of anime, a lot of foreign shows too. So I started to explore them. And I found a lot of good ones that were very addictive that I wish could be made into movies. Because if you watch Hollywood lately, Hollywood's kind of struggling for good plots and good characters, so they've been leveraging a lot of comic books and things like that. And there's a lot of anime out there that would make incredible movies too. So that's a hobby right now, I would say, is watching anime. Other television shows I watch on a regular basis. Big Bang Theory, a big fan of Big Bang Theory. Identify with that show an awful lot. We've been watching No Ordinary Family. My wife is a big Monk fan, but Monk went off the air last year.
Yeah, darn it.
Yeah. So the nice thing about Netflix is it's allowed us to rewatch all the old shows we grew up with. So right now my wife is watching all the old Mary Tyler Moore's and Murder, She Wrote's. And she just exercises a whole series and then goes on to the next one. So we've actually watched far more television right now than we ever did when we had cable. And of course, I'm saving like $45 a month now by not paying that bill. So
my problem, Keith, was that I couldn't find everything I wanted, like Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, I had to give up some things. I'm not a big sports person. Usually, the sports is the big stumbling block for somebody cutting the cable. Because if you're really into sports and you cut cable, that means you're pretty much saying, I'm only going to watch sports on the live network channels now. Because you're not going to have ESPN and you're not going to have all that stuff anymore. Didn't apply to me. Yeah. The only two channels that I really missed getting were Sci-Fi and Comedy Central. But Sci-Fi, except for Doctor Who, got really, really bad. I mean, there wasn't anything on Sci-Fi I was watching anymore. Because ever since they did their name change, I wasn't happy with what they were doing anymore. In Comedy Central, the only thing I was watching on a regular basis were Colbert and The Daily Show, and those are available online to watch.
There you go.
So, I watch the Doctor Who's. I beg, borrow, and steal the Doctor Who's when they come out. So that's I've watched a lot of Netflix. Of course, gets the DVDs. So you can watch the series on a DVD as well. So, but it reminded me that I'm reliving the way I grew up with television in the first place.
You guys are really dating yourself if you're talking about watching Mary Tyler Moore. How old were you then?
I don't know. I mean, I was born in the late 50s. So.
Oh, you were? So you're actually younger than me. Dang.
I'm younger than you?
Yeah, I was born in 1950.
Oh, yeah,
Even
you're older than me.
I'm an old, yeah, Mary Tyler Moore. My God, I
Yeah.
mean, she actually looked young and sexy. Now she looks older and not so sexy. But
Well, I'm not going to go there.
no, no, we're all older.
And then another hobby I had that I gave up in about 5 years ago is I used to own a race car. I used to drive a Lotus 7 um, sports car,
Whoa,
street registered, but it was on the track a couple of times too.
yeah,
But that gets expensive, and you get a little old for that too. So since I found a good buyer for the car, I left that hobby.
probably just as well because you're still in one piece now.
Well, I didn't race competitively. You go race in
Yeah,
car clubs, so you just go.
yeah.
You go. I mean, nobody wants to see their car damaged, so everybody just goes on the track just to be on the track and have the experience.
Ah,
You can't go faster than like 60 miles an hour. You know,
and
but
it's safe because you're going what in circles.
yeah. But usually the tracks are gorgeous. They're out in the middle of farmland, and stuff like that. So I used
Ah,
to do autocrossing too, but autocrossing is so demanding on a car that it's very easy to quickly rack up bills autocrossing, even on tires. So I only did it a couple of times for the experience. It's also very unpleasant. You have to really be into it because you're usually out in the middle of a huge asphalt parking lot, like an abandoned airfield or something like that, with no shade anywhere, and you're in the middle of the hot sun. And so you have to be pretty serious to keep that one up, I think.
now what is autocrossing?
Autocrossing is when they set up a course using orange cones,
Okay,
and the cars are split into various divisions based on your weight and your category, and it's time trials. Whoever can complete the course the most accurately, the fastest, wins for that group.
okay,
And the course
gotcha.
usually has straightaways and hairpin turns and things like that in it. And more than half the people, including myself, will hit a cone. Because it's not easy to do unless you're serious about the whole thing. If you're just doing it for fun, it's not unusual to hit a cone or take out a cone or two. And when you do that, then you're disqualified. You're do not finish at that point.
Oh
So,
my.
but yeah, I would race. My car would do 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. I had a very fast car. But the problem is, I would race with one or two other people that had the same car I had, and they were avid autocross racing fans, and I just couldn't come anywhere near the times that those people did, by a minute. So I had no illusions that I was ever going to be anything at that. But it was a fun experience.
Well, good. And you got out of it without hurting yourself or whatever. So,
Yeah, well, people tend not to hurt themselves, and that they tend to cause serious repairs in their car because you're stressing the car out really a lot. Throttle
yeah,
cables, tires, wheel alignments, that kind of thing.
yeah,
It's very demanding on the car. A lot of people don't put their family cars on the line for stuff like that.
duh. Let's get out in the minivan on the autocross.
No, but
Ooh,
people do it. People do it.
I like that. We can. I was going to say I can't remember what I was going to say, so it wasn't very important. Um, yeah, yeah. Hey, well, we've managed so far to do a good solid 45 minutes before I start wondering what we're going to talk about next. So it's not bad.
Well,
Uh,
what do you want to talk about next? We can talk about social media. What do you think?
yeah.
What do you
When
think
you
about
are
social
you
media?
what do I think about
Yeah.
it?
I,
I'm not this. I don't know about you, but I'm not the same with a lot of other people. I know Kat Armstrong was saying something about Facebook is the Walmart of the internet or something like that, and I totally disagree for myself. I go to Walmart once a month, get my groceries, drool over the electronics, and go home. Get the
mm,
beer too, of course. Walmart, I mean not Walmart, but Facebook, I go to maybe once a month. Mainly, my chief interest in Facebook was to go compare memories with friends, close friends, and relatives, which doesn't happen much anymore. Now I've got like, I don't know, hundreds of friends on Facebook who I barely know because I just bumped into them somewhere on the internet. So Facebook means nothing to me. I don't do the games or anything. So I don't know what your take is on your social media.
Well, I'm a big social media enthusiast. I think it's an incredible time, and I find it very exciting. Since I've been an early adopter of most stuff. I was a user of Twitter in 2007, before it became popular. I was a blogger at Red Hat, in 1999 2000. That's when I started blogging. They weren't called blogs back then. They were called online diaries. It was very common practice in the open source community to blog so that people would get to know the people involved in particular projects or heading projects, and you would blog about your personal life a little bit as well as blog about your project and things that you were finding. And it was because most social media, most open source projects are worldwide communities. Even when I worked at Red Hat and I had a team of 5 people. One person was in China, one person was in Edinburgh, the other person was in UK, and then two people were in the United States. That's very common, and you stay completely connected to the internet with IRC and your online diary system and things like that. So that's how I got involved in blogging. So I've been a blogger since 1999, and so I moved from that platform to LiveJournal to MySpace to eventually having my own domain. And I actually went through the pain. It took me a month to corral all of my old blogs and postings, including the stuff I did on Usenet, and move it all over into my blog. So if you go to my blog on keithbarrett.com, you go back to the old postings. They go back to the 80s and maybe even the 70s in some cases, at least the 80s.
Wow.
Yeah. So since blogging is considered part of social media, that would be my entrance into social media. But I was an early adopter of MySpace, and I was an early adopter of Facebook because I hated MySpace. I recognized that Facebook was superior. Facebook is built on LAMP technology. MySpace is built on .NET type technology. And when the audience started to gear up on Facebook to the point where that's the problem with social media, is the platforms, even if they're superior, have no value until the audience shows up. An audience takes time, and it moves quicker and quicker. The move from MySpace to Facebook compared to how quickly people adopt Twitter, especially when it started to become public with Ashton Kutcher and Oprah, were exponential difference. We live in a time right now where social media, meaning using technology to collaborate or communicate with communities and form groups of common interests, I think it's a pretty amazing time because on the one hand, we're watching society change. People tend to form virtual families now. They form virtual friendships. They take them with them wherever they go now. They're not geographically limited anymore. You can form. I have friends that were lifetime friends for years and years and years and didn't meet each other until like 5 years or 10 years later. They met each other for the first time, and they're still friends. I was able to reconnect with people I went to elementary school with eventually through MySpace and Facebook. That would not have been possible prior to that. So it's an amazing time. Twitter is interesting because Twitter was really the first introduction into real-time social media communications. Twitter started off mostly being adopted by tech people or people wanting to do text messaging but wanted to leverage a platform that had an audience and can do it for free rather than doing it from your phone alone. Although the phone interface for Twitter initially was one of the most popular ways of connecting to it. That's why there's a 140 character limit. So most people would use it as a method of sharing information. There weren't celebrities on it. There weren't a lot of non-technical people on it. There wasn't a lot of chatter and casual small talk on it. People tended to post links that were interesting. As the population exploded on it, you got huge, diverse groups of people talking on it, and communities forming around common interests. And now you have trending topics and all these other things. So it's going to be interesting. Twitter is starting to have problems with spam now, and I'm pretty sure something will eventually replace Twitter because something will always replace. Nobody believed anything would replace MySpace. Facebook came along and did that. Facebook has had a huge number of problems with security Facebook has made a lot of people unhappy that would love to go somewhere else, but right now there is no alternative, so they're still there. But eventually something will come along, and it'll provide everything that Facebook does, plus get rid of a lot of pain and the things that people don't like about it, and they'll move there. The problem with these tools is they're never permanent. You know, people aren't using LiveJournal really anymore. People aren't using MySpace anymore. So people aren't using Friendster.
Keith.
Yeah.
You mentioned a recent discussion you had with the lady about how she views Twitter and Friends versus the way you view them. Would you like to share that experience?
Yeah, it was an interesting. It got a little heated, but it was an interesting discussion because it started off with some people posing the question, why can't they get a lot of followers? Some people were only getting a couple of hundred to 500 tops, but the way they were using Twitter was purely for casual conversation. They were using it as a family, for social conversation. It was a lot of, good mornings, how are you? I'm going here, good to see you, how's your health, that kind of thing. And statistics have shown that that can only support a certain level, certain numbers of people before that doesn't go any further. Because when you get a really huge audience of people, not everyone is interested in what everybody else has to casually say to another person. But if you're posting links, if you're posting news, if you're posting entertainment, that tends to appeal to larger and larger audiences. So that's one of the ways you grow an audience in Twitter. Is as Robert Scoble said once, make every tweet count. Make it say something that would be of interest to an audience. But this person didn't like that point of view. And that was the way it was used before it became very, very social, very casual. They thought that was kind of dehumanizing, that it wasn't treating people as people on the other end. And this person got kind of emotional about the whole thing. And I thought it was interesting because really what it comes down to is the argument of controlled use of Twitter versus casual use of Twitter. And, what are your audience? What are your goals? Why are you using it in the first place? And it's used for a variety of reasons. And the variety of reasons are going to have a different audience, different growth numbers, and different results. And I thought the whole thing was very fascinating.
Yeah, and I suppose some people who post innocuous tweets like I'm not wearing any pants may not get a lot of serious followers.
Well, certainly if you have a circle of 50 friends, they might enjoy that. If you have a circle of 1,000 people, I'm sure a good number of them could care less.
And maybe it might be a good idea. Some people like to post silliness like that to actually have a silly identity for that purpose.
Yeah, that's one of the discussions I pointed out that depending on what's going on. For example, my whole identity in the internet universe and my brand in internet is my name, and it's very tech based. If you Google my name, I'm usually the number 1 or the number 2 hit result, and it'll be for my blog or in some relation to my resume geared around technology. When I started to work for Disney and I started to get a large following for people who were just interested in the things I had to say about my experiences there, my group became very mixed. And the technology people could care less about what I was saying about Disney, and the Disney people didn't understand a lot of the technology stuff I was writing. So when I got my audience large enough, I split into two. And I have two identities on there. I have one that's dedicated to, as much as possible, to my Disney conversations, and the other one to technology and humor. And that's how I do that. Because I look at my following as I'm there to provide content to them. I think it's all about content. So as much as possible, I'm posting stuff that I think is useful to them or is entertaining or humorous to them. Now, it's not 100% that way. Sometimes I'll post something about myself. So, I'll try to do that some ways that's in a humorous way or a way somebody else can identify with it. But sometimes these things lead into conversations where you're talking to one or two people, and I'm sure some people are tuning out when that happens. But I try to avoid that as much as possible. I tend to look at Facebook as the better platform for that. Facebook is designed for you to share photos with groups of people, share where you're going, what you're doing. Sounds like you're having a nuclear meltdown at your place right now. Hey, Ron, you still there?
I'm sorry.
Sounds like he's tearing his place apart right now.
I have this watch that is fiendish. It keeps going on. The alarm keeps going off at 9 o'clock, and I could never seem to disable it. And even though I knew pretty much where it was, I still had to kind of follow the sound. And of course, when I'm doing that, I'm away from the microphone, so everything's fine. I should remember from now on to keep this near the computer, especially if I got a live show running. So I'm sorry to interrupt everything.
No, I just thought it sounded fun. It sounded funny. It sounded like, didn't know if you were having a smoke detector go off or.
Oh no, that would be much louder. By the way, when I was talking about people who might lose Twitter followers for posting silly things like I'm not wearing any pants, I was talking about myself, and I know I've lost a few. So like tonight after the show, if I'm going to be on Twitter, I'm probably going to be sitting on the easy chair watching wrestling. And I may or may not take the iPod Touch with me because I only have the Ron Knights one there. If I want to be really silly, I try to do silly_Ron. That way people who don't want to see that junk won't see it. Anyway, how do you think we're doing? You think did you finish your thought on that when I walked away?
Yeah, I mean, social media. I think it's all about content, and post whatever content you're posting will attract whatever audience is interested in that. So it's like humor. It's like if you're doing stand-up comedy, don't worry about if people get a joke. The right people will get the joke that you're telling. So the right people will follow you. You just have to decide what your presence is going to look like. You know, what is going to be your priority and how you use social media. The only thing is I'm very cognizant of is all my social media usage. I'm very aware that my current employer or my future employer might be watching. So I try never to post anything extremely negative. I never post anything negative about work. I post mostly entertaining things or news, humorous stuff. If I post something about myself, it's something that's generic enough that it's not, it's not something I'm embarrassed. You got to think of it as a bulletin board that the world can see. So as long as you're putting something up there that you don't care if, everybody can see, then you're doing fine.
Yeah, that I start to think once in a while after I've done something like I've been really upset with Mozy for changing, getting rid of unlimited and changing the rates because my rates would go up from $10 a month for 2 computers to $85 if I figured it right.
Right.
And boy, I've been posting a lot of Mozy, anti-Mozy stuff. But here I am thinking, geez, I wouldn't mind getting up in the big leagues and having sponsors. I guess Mozy wouldn't want to be my sponsor, would they?
Well, I think all of us would like to have sponsors for some of the work that we're doing. At least to the minimum point where it helps pay for the costs of doing it.
Yeah, well, of course, for me, one advantage is that I'm not working. I'm on disability, and might as well just say I'm retired. So I got plenty of time, and I don't worry about my employer saying stuff. But then again, even then, you still should watch a little bit. With myself, most of you out here who know me, have seen me, the Ron Knights identity, most people have seen, started when I switched my YouTube username to Ron Knights. Before that, I was doing poser art tutorials and stuff under other names. And one day I was talking to a friend of mine, Roger, who's been on one of my shows, and he said, let's be interested in checking out my videos. I was talking about my poser tutorials. He said, well, what's your Twitter username? And I said, I'm not actually sure. It might be, I can't remember what it was, _2 or whatever it was. It turned out I had like 2 different identities because I forgot the password on the first one. And he says, well, what's the matter with you? You don't even know your own username. So I decided I was going to be consistent. Ron Knights.
Yeah, that's actually common practice now, even on business cards, because it's becoming, some people call it the dial tone of the internet, but the value that Twitter has brought almost above everything else, besides real-time news by people locally at something, so you can get it, is the possibility of a universal identity. Because when you have email addresses, the bottom line is unless you own your own domain and you own it forever, your email addresses can change throughout your whole life. I used to have a Yahoo address. I dumped that. Now I have a Gmail address. Now I don't promote that anymore. I promote the ones against my own domain. Your Twitter ID doesn't have any association with the platform that it's using. It's just whatever ID you have with an @ in front of it. So and people can talk to you without actually following you or doing anything. You know, they can just, all they got to do is post something on Twitter with a reference of your name in the sentence, and if you're monitoring for it, you'll see it. So it's a safe identity that you can give out that's platform independent for people to actually reach you, or begin, if you want to give them more, like your phone number or your email address, you can do that after that. So it's showing up on everybody's business card now, and it's becoming common practice to have that. So I would recommend to everybody that even if you decide you're not going to use Twitter, set up your Twitter account that DMs email you, and give yourself a good ID that you don't mind promoting, and at least have that protect, before somebody else grabs what you want.
Yeah, I got my first got my rawnights.com domain back around 1999. I've kept it ever since. Don't ask me why I went for .com instead of .org or whatever, because I never had a business.
It's going to become unimportant soon, because they're going to be able to call it anything they want, because domain prefixes are running out. So,
okay, guys, we're at the 9 o'clock point. Any last words you have to say, or does anybody have any questions for Keith?
Hey, Ron, we can keep going after the show if we want to keep talking and chat and answer
Well,
questions.
here's the deal, my friend. No offense intended, but 9 o'clock is TN wrestling. TNA.
Oh, I see.
Something like that. But I'm not going to cut you off in the middle of a sentence, or in case anybody has a question. If we got nothing more we want to say, then I can say, it has been great talking to you. And I knew that when you expressed concerns about whether or not we'd have enough to talk about to last an hour, that would not be a problem.
Oh, no, if you ever want to do this again and go into I have a lot of philosophies and opinions and experience in open source. We barely touched that. Social media, software development projects I've worked on. There's a whole stuff we could talk about.
Yeah, well, you know me.
Especially if you're very opinionated on a couple of things too, you can throw that.
Me opinionated? Hey guys, if I've been known to be opinionated about anything, it really has been a pleasure. You probably know I'm still surprised that I've had such positive feedback or positive response when I started lining people up for my show. It took me a matter of a couple days to have January full. Same thing with February. About the middle of the month is when I start asking people who haven't been on the show if they want to be on again. And so that's what we're looking at. I'm not even going to be looking at the next schedule next month until about the middle, but definitely we'll have you on. And if you want me to be on your show sometime, that'd be cool.
I was going to say that next, as soon as I start getting my stuff going.
Yeah, and I probably could end up being on your show before you come back on my show, depending on what your schedule is like. In other words, you wouldn't be back on my show until March, but if you want to be on before then, as long as it's not interfering, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
I'm going to play it by ear.
There you go. You know how to get a hold of me.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure. It was a lot of fun. I hope people found it interesting.
Oh, I'm sure they did. Based on some of the responses there, yes, they have. And I wouldn't be surprised if you get a few people reaching out to you. Feel free to post any links. They've already got your website up in the top of the chat if you want to put that up or anything else.
I'm pretty easy to find. It's my name everywhere. So it's @KeithBarrett is my Twitter ID. KeithBarrett.com is my website. If you search for Keith Barrett with no spaces in it, I'm going to be several results on that first page. Facebook, it's /Keith Barrett on Facebook. So if you go to my Google's profiles page, which is actually profiles.google.com/KeithBarrett.com, I have links to over 100 social media services that I use, some of them more frequently than others. So I'm pretty easy to find.
There you go. You really can't be having your own name as your online identity because people know it's you. At the same token, there are people like the Tech Buzz. You know who he is, but it's kind of like two names. Steve Haywood and over the tech buzz.
Yeah, and Steve and I have been talking. We're hoping we're going to be able to do a couple things together too.
Sounds great. Sounds like Steve's got a lot of things potentially or already in the pipeline starting, let's say, March, including 3 wise guys with Z's. Guys like me and Boo and Michael Lefton and whatnot. So
yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna say my biggest problem with the tech buzz is I work while he's on. So if he and I to do something together, it's probably gonna be on the weekends. That's what we're looking at.
Keith, that's one of the reasons why I have my 2 different shows, 2 different days, 2 different times. Time zone people and working people. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Between the 2, somebody in Australia is liable to be able to make one of my shows or watch it live, and someone in England will be able to watch one. So
yeah, and my studio is keithbarrett.tv too.
There you go.
So
okay, my friends.
Well, thank you.
It's about that time for me. I want to catch my wrestling. It sounds like we've gotten our good show in, and I'm so glad we had no sound problems. It's been recorded. And what I'm going to do now to make it official, my friends, if you guys want to hang out and chat, fine, but I'm going to be bailing out because the TV that is also the monitor for the chat, I want to watch my wrestling. So this is going to be the, what do you call it, outro, and that'll be the end of the show. Thanks, everybody, for your support, and here we go. Okay. We are finito.
Cool. Well, thank you, Ron. It was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you, and you're welcome. And we'll stay in touch, right?
Okay. Well, enjoy your wrestling.
Okay. See you later, man.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.